Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Interviews, brought to you by the University of Science and Philosophy. I am your host, Matt Presti. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to share some of the new developments from the university, particularly the website, philosophy.org. We have a new webmaster by the name of Ramu Shagis, who is doing all the artwork, restoration photos, just an incredible plethora of wonderful and marvelous pictures that make up the new and expanded gallery, as well as the store, which you can check out, has been completely updated and revamped. Quite a remarkable transition and transformation, and we implore you all to check it out. We're pleased to report that the university's involvement with the Center of the One Heart Homecoming for 2015 was an excellent time, a remarkable success. We like to say thanks to all of those who came from faraway places to attend and meet with other like minds, Russell students and the like. And while going through the archives, we were able to discover many new things that have yet to be seen, such as blueprints of Russell's optical dynamo generator, which are currently being reviewed by our Science and Research Committee, as well as writings from later illuminations, 10 years to be exact, from the day of the major illumination in 1921. Walter Russell wrote about 12 pages of an illumination he called the Third Communion. Happened on June 26 or thereabouts, 1931. So there are many more exciting releases and new discoveries waiting to be found in the archives of the University of Science and Philosophy. Moving ahead, our guest today is Victoria Airisun Wonderli. We will be featuring a presentation she did in 2013 at the One Heart Homecoming. Airisun wrote the book called Swannanoa Palace, A Pictorial History, Its Past and People, 100 Years. Very detailed book, heavy stock, full of amazing photos never before seen, and a very detailed history of Swannanoa Palace, its past and people. And speaking with Victoria, she said she does have another book coming out in the near future, which is going to showcase many of the illustrations, never before seen illustrations by Dr. Walter Russell, which appeared in many of the periodicals around the turn of the 20th century. So without further ado, Victoria Airisun Wonderli.
An announcement just about these framed works over here. A few of these are Walter Russell's illustrations that date back approximately 100 years. A couple of the photos are mine of up here of Swannanoa. I've been shooting Swannanoa for about 3 years now, and but fell in love with it a really long time ago. Came up here in 1985, met Leo Russell. She came down these very, very steps. Talked with her over at this fireplace over here. And what amazed me about her was that she talked about all of the things that mattered. And her energy was so alive. Those are the two things that I was so impacted about Leo Russell. So, Walter Russell, which we're going to talk about as we go through these slides, I have really fallen in love with Walter Russell this past year. Look back into his history. So I really, during the course of the day, if we're breaking or whatever, I really invite you to come look at his illustrations. My formal training was in art, so that's what I love about Walter Russell the most. But as many of you know, he was quite the genius. He was called the Leonardo da Vinci of the 20th century. So, what I'd like to say, also to introduce, is that Walter Russell, one of the quotes I love about Walter, he said, "The foundation of the universe is love, balance, and unity." And as we gather here today and for this weekend, you know, I think about everyone connecting with their hearts. And what is community? And it's coming together in unity. And it's common unity. So I believe and feel that all the homecomings that we've ever had, and the very special one that we're having this weekend, especially about Walter and Lyle Russell, is about coming together and sharing our hearts and connecting and being in unity. And they always spoke about one world unity. And I think with our group, The One Heart, we seek to carry this through. So the other thing I'd like to share is in the past couple of weeks I've been thinking about history. And what does history mean? What is the value of history? Think about that. What does it bring us? So the first thing that I came up with about history was that it brought us memories. Where do those memories take us? And if we think about our elderly and the people who are older, and they have maybe a few more memories than we have, you know, it brings us back to emotion. It brings us back to our hearts, the fond memories we have as a child, the memories we have of our parents or our children, you know. So this connects us with our hearts. So memories are what we share with history. The second thing that came to me about history was there is something that we've learned in our histories. And there may be something that we've learned in another person's history. So I think about Walter and Lau, and I've probably studied them since 1985, and the works and the message that they bring, and how special this place, and the energy of this special place was here for them. And so many of us, you know. So I have learned so much from the history and the message of the Russells. So let's begin. So this is the front of my book. This is Swannanoa. The meaning of Swannanoa. Well, somehow you jumped ahead. We should be at the title page. There we go. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the meaning of Swannanoa. Lau Russell's, she studied it a little bit, and there was more of an East Indian meaning of Swannanoa, which was the mother of heaven, land of beauty. But my favorite is Cherokee, which comes from North Carolina, and I'm part Cherokee, and it means the beautiful trail, the beautiful path. So that's the meaning of Swannanoa. Next slide, please. You're going to show two at a time? That's okay? This is one and that's one. It's coming up? Okay. All right. I would like to... No, I'd go smaller, I think, a little bit. That's better. That's fine. Mr. J.B. Yount III, he couldn't be here today, but I just want to say hello to him if he's listening. And he was such an integral person in the beginning of Swannanoa. It was his grandfather who owned this mountain land. It was quite a few acres. And his father eventually became the attorney to Lau Russell. And when his father died, he became Lau Russell's attorney. So his tie-in here is just absolutely tremendous. I treasure him as a friend. He is the author of Remembered for Love, Lau Russell of Swannanoa. And I felt extremely honored to have him write the foreword and edit my book. So I'm very grateful to J.B. Yount. Then we get into the Dooleys. So part of the book, there's a couple of letters, and I don't think I show them here, but the Dooleys came from Richmond. Sally Mae, she was born southeast of Richmond on a plantation. She came from, actually her ancestors came from King Edward, so she had a lot of royal blood. They were quite wealthy, very, very wealthy. Her mother died when she was young, about when she was 7, and her sisters moved to Stanton, Virginia. So she was always traveling to see her older sisters back and forth to Stanton, which is how she met Major Dooley. And it was after the Civil War, after he had fought in the Civil War, and he was injured. His right wrist, I believe it was injured. And he met Sallie Mae in Stanton. They became married. They lived in a boarding house in Richmond for a while. And then after he built up his wealth within the railroad company, he was a railroad magnate. And one of the interesting things about Dooley is that he, when he was 15, he wrote something out that by the time he was a man, he was going to have made $1,500,000 or something. And he put that out into the world. He wrote it. It's in his own letters. And he created much more wealth than that. He was one of the richest men in America, one of the 4,000 richest men in America at about the turn of the century. So they built Maymont in 1893. It actually took a long time to build Maymont, much longer actually than it took to build Swannanoa, only because they ran into complications. But Maymont is in Richmond. It is completely renovated. I suggest to anyone who wants to study the Gilded Age homes or the Dooleys to go to Maymont, and it's a 100-acre park. It's just a wonderful day experience to go there. They left it to the city of Richmond when they both died, and so it's for everyone to enjoy. I spent the day there last spring. So they decided about 1910, 1911, before 1911, in the year of 1910, Major Dooley began looking for property up here. They were always coming to visit her sisters in Stanton. So basically, he found out about this property that Mr. Yount, the grandfather of J.B. Yount, had for sale, and he started writing letters back and forth. And some of these letters I handled were 100 years old, and I handled them with cotton gloves just to be able to reprint them for the book. So anyway, they wanted a summer home. So one of the interesting things is that with Maymont, it's about 26 rooms, kind of Victorian, Gilded Age home. But when they decided to build Swannanoa, they wanted something large, something that could be here for about 5 months, from about March or April to October. So they decided that they wanted to buy the land. It's very interesting to read in the book. Let's go forward. Okay, to be able to show you the possibility of what Swannanoa looked like way, way long ago, I think it's interesting to show you Maymont and just the interior of Maymont. And a lot of these slides we're going to try to run through quickly, like these. This was their baronial hall, their Tiffany window, very similar to what we have here. Major Dooley's library was bigger in Maymont than the one over here, which I find very interesting. That's a distinctive chair. It's called the Winged Lion chair that he used quite a bit. The pink drawing room was where the ladies retired in the evening. Jump forward, please. Okay, the Swan Bed that Maymont now has used to be here because of Swannanoa. Now, I do want to share with you that this page right here is not in my book. I could not get the credit and the permission to print these photos in my book. But I wanted to show them to you today because these were the furniture that was up in the Swan bedroom of Sallie Mae Dooley's. And I just think they're gorgeous. One of the things I do know is that the Swan Bed and all the Swan furniture was made of poplar and then painted. And it was made by a designer out of New York. There are two more day beds besides this bed that's there, but they're stored at Maymont. The horse, you may want to look at this. No one ever put this together before. But the horse right here on the chair, which is not in the book, but I do show it, is that this is the Dooley crest. So the swan out here on the front of the columns, and the horse represented Mr. Dooley, and the swan represented Sally Dooley. I have no doubt in my mind after finding this at Maymont. Okay, can we go forward? Beautiful furniture. These were the types of carriages that they had back around the turn of the century. They're not original, but I took photos of those. Maymont had its own Italian garden with a pergola up there, the long pergola. It was spring when I went, so it was just gorgeous taking these photos. You may, when you roam around Swannanoa today, if you look at the fountain over here on the east end, you will see that it's very similar to the fountains at Maymont. Very similar because, they built them both. Let's go forward. Okay, so now we're getting into Swannanoa. So it was January 1911 when Dooley wrote and finally made the decision to buy this land. And in 1912, he wanted to buffer the property even more, so he bought more acreage. In 1913, he bought even more until he ended up with 763 acres. And that was what he had originally to buffer this property. So these are extremely early photos that are tinted, that are in the book. Probably could be 100 years old. Okay, the swan. We talked about the name of the swan. I think it's very interesting, when you're roaming around, look at I think it's brass that's up there above the door. I've never figured out exactly why there's the oar that the swan has, unless it kind of signified the Swannanoa River in North Carolina. That's the only thing I can come up with. And this shows you the Swannanoa River Valley in North Carolina. There we are with the swan and the horse, signifying them. The swan bedroom upstairs, which, no one can roam around in right now, but these are early pictures when the Russells were here. Here's the letter. That's the final letter that Dooley wrote to Joseph B. Yount, and that's JB's grandfather right up there. His family would come up here and picnic on the property before the Dooleys bought it, and when the Dooleys bought the land, as they were building Swannanoa, they would come up here and picnic on the property also. So he didn't want to pay $100 an acre. That's what he says in the letter, but he did. That's what he paid for it. Let's go forward. This estate, this home was built after the Villa de' Medici in Rome. Dooley sent his architect to Europe and studied all of the great homes in Europe. And this is what it's modeled after. This is the actual Swannanoa elevation from the plans. So wanted to show that. I'm so proud to be able to show the earliest photos of Swannanoa being built. And it was so exciting to me to find these because there were more than I imagined that there were. So I do show you some of them. This is probably my favorite because of the horse. And the man over to the right, which I imagine is Dooley. I really think it is. I think he probably just came to Stanton, dropped off his wife, went to Waynesboro to the livery, rented a horse, and came up here. That's just how I imagine it. I really do. So I just proposed that for something to ponder. Let's go forward. Who was the contractor, M.R. Ellis of Waynesboro, is on a steamroller, and that's the Palace Gardens right behind him. So he was the major contractor that built everything right here from Waynesboro. They brought in all of the marble. The exterior marble is from Georgia, the state of Georgia. And all of this interior, all of the interior marble is Sienna marble Carrara from Italy. So briefly, we're going to flip through these because we want to get to the Russells. So these are just some of the best pictures of Swannanoa being built. This is quite a well-known photographer over here. That's probably one of the earliest. These are photos taken, probably the upper one and the lower one, from the water tower, very early. This is the original gateway that was built here that was torn down when the motels were built down below. Very much, very much. This is the cartouche that you will notice as you go out. It says 1912. The Dooleys didn't move in until 1913, so we're still celebrating the 100th anniversary. Yay! We're very glad about that. I just love the doors, you know, with the cupids playing the instruments on the front. This is the similarity between Maymont carriage house and Swannanoa carriage house, early photo. Very much alike. This is a plate. I've never found one like it. J.B. Yount III owns this plate. I had to handle it with care as I photographed it. If anybody ever finds one, please call me up, because I have never found one. It's from the Swannanoa Country Club. It was the country club. And when it was the country club was when President Coolidge came here and stayed in November 28, 1927 for about 4 nights, 5 days for Thanksgiving. And I love this photo here, who I tracked down the guy who had that photo and got permission to print it. The other ones I believe I found in the Waynesboro Library. Let's go forward. I love this map. I ended up changing this map. This is not in the book exactly. It's a little pamphlet map that said Swannanoa Country Club, which I converted. So I'm selling these maps over here. I've only got a few today. They're $10 a piece. But they date back to the late 1920s. Showing you where to find Swannanoa on the East Coast, which I think is just wonderful, you know. So we're going to put Swannanoa back on the map. That's my decision. Okay, so then we're getting into the Russells. It's extremely hard to fit this in 10 or 15 minutes, but we're going to give it a go. Okay, let's go forward. Walter Russell. I have here, if these are over with the university books, this is the foremost biography on Walter Russell. It came out last year. Charles Hardy called me last week. He was so anxious to get my book. And I just can't say enough about it. The research, he spent 3 years on it, especially the research he did in the New York Times, is just phenomenal to let you know who Walter Russell was. Just a genius, absolute genius. So a worthy messenger. If you can get a hold of this book, I highly suggest it. Excuse me? I think so. Check with the university table. I'm selling over at my table J.B. Yount III's book on Leo Russell. So I do have some here. I'll be happy to show those to you. So let's go forward a little. Glenn Clark wrote the first biography, very thin book. Highly suggest this book. One of the first books I read about the Russells at all. And it's just phenomenal, The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. 1946 was when it first came out. He was interviewed by Glenn Clark very much. There's a lot of Walter Russell quotes in here. His philosophy, his beliefs, and how he believed in the genius in every person. Just phenomenal. Man Who Tapped. Let's go forward. When he started out, he was a musician and a composer. He only had a 4th grade education. He was 9 years old when he quit school. He said it was one of the smartest things he ever did. Doesn't say a lot for today's education, but you know, he realized at a very early age he was connected with the Creator from a very early age, and he knew the innate genius that he held. He just really realized it from a very young child. So he had some mentors as he was growing up, even though he wasn't in school. So he was conducting small orchestras in the summer as he was a late teenager. So it's just phenomenal. He wrote and composed music. He played the organ for the church, self-taught, pretty much. When he was about 16, he got accepted into the Massachusetts Normal Art School, and he passed the entrance exams. He must have studied, or maybe he didn't. I don't know. He tapped in somewhere, but he was accepted into the school, which is now a college. So he got in when he was 16. So this is when he really started his artistic career. Forward. Yeah, you went way forward. One back. When he was in school, he spent some time in Paris. He went to school over in Paris, studying art, working with the artists there, the teachers. When he came back, he got married fairly young. I think he was about 19. And he began doing sketches about children. And he did his 3 books. These are children's books. I have 2 in my collection. The Sea Children, which came out in 1901, is the most difficult one to find. I will tell you that. It's very expensive, too. So the value of them keeps going up. There are many illustrations, and especially the ones that you see in here, and these 4 in the book right there have never before been seen by the general public. He did these in 1930s. These came out in the Story of the Bible by Frank E. Wright. It's an e-book online. You can pull it up. Story of the Bible by Frank E. Wright, and you will see these, along with Rembrandt's, along with the great, Michelangelo and Leonardo, and I'm like, that's the company Walter Russell needs to be with. I've always felt that. Let's go forward. He became an architect. These are kind of in chronological order, so the time in his life when he came from this to this to this. He probably helped design and build $25 million worth of buildings. That was $25 million worth of buildings back then. So we're talking about 1920s. What they would be worth now, who knows. So right in New York City, most of them. Some in Florida, he built buildings. Then he got into children's portrait painting. Can we go forward? Right here. These right here come from the Ladies' Home Journal. I have photos of those in the book from my friend Sam Spiker's private collection. And they're just phenomenal. They were seen up here when the Russell's works were here, and all of these portraits were seen here. Just a phenomenal painter, and this is probably what I love about Walter myself the most, because I'm a painter. Let's go forward. He became a sculptor. It's like, is there anything this man did not do? Just phenomenal. All of these sculptures were up here. I read that when they came here, it had 3 truckloads of 36 tons of sculpture in Walter's art. So I think that was a little overwhelming for Leo to put in a 52-room palace even. I've often thought about that. So one of his most famous is the Mark Twain sculpture. Also, the first one he did was when the first sculptor opted out on the Thomas Edison, and he decided he'd do it. He'd never sculpted before. Let's go forward. Very famous, the 4 Freedoms that were very prominent here. This was in the music room when the university was here, the 4 Freedoms, and there's also a copy of it down in Florida, Madison, Florida, over there. The building of the Christ statue was a phenomenal thing. They actually, as you can see, this is the palace right here, the baronial hall that he was building the mold for it. So 30 foot. It was 30 foot. Unfortunately, it fell down when they decided to move it. So anyway, He wanted to build a 600-foot one up here on the mountain. That was one of the things he really wanted to do before he died, but regretfully, he was unable to do it. Let's go forward. Walter Russell's illumination. I could talk hours just about Walter Russell's illumination. So we want to get to Leo here because we've only got a few minutes left. His scientific part of Walter Russell, when he wrote the Universal One, this book came through when he was basically for 39 days and nights, almost 40, that he basically was out of body and wrote all the scientific information started coming through. And that's how the Universal One was written. This is some of his artwork describing his philosophies of the science. Let's go forward. He spoke all over the United States many times. So our local Albemarle magazine featured him in 1990. Okay. Walter Russell, some of my favorite photos in his last years when he would walk the property. This is their wedding. I think it's important to note they got married right before they came to look at Swannanoa. They got married in Colorado. They spent their honeymoon painting, both of them, across the United States and came to look at Swannanoa property. She had a vision. She had a 3-day vision that she looked out over the east part of this property, right over here. If you go out, it'd be right over that direction. That she knew where they wanted to begin an Institute of Man, which eventually became the University of Science and Philosophy. So that was her vision over here. Here's JB's book, which you can see at my table out on the porch. So I believe that Walter Russell heard about Swannanoa probably through President Coolidge because he was in what's called the Twilight Club. This is my belief after much research. So he was interested in looking at this property the day they came up here, and Leo looked at that view out over here. She knew this was the place that they were supposed to be. Leo Russell was born in England, a little northwest of London, a little hamlet. She was born Daisy Cook. She did not become Leo Russell until much later. She painted this at 10. She had her own genius within, so she understood when she finally met Walter. Their belief systems were so identical. So she was quite the genius herself. That's her first husband there. I don't think he ever came to the United States. You know, they had divorced before she came to the United States to get away from World War II. And that's how she got here. She had a very successful health and beauty business in Europe, very successful. Attempted to bring that over to the United States, and it didn't quite work. So she kind of floated as a journalist for a while, did some writing, worked for a couple of different companies. Let's go forward. This is probably about the age when she was in New York here. I love these photos of her. This is the house she built in Europe, but ended up having to sell. She was quite renowned in Europe. Many people knew her because her business over there was so successful. She was great friends with Eddie Albert, just showing you some of the people she knew. Shirley MacLaine came here to visit. This is part of the chapter in my book of their lives at Swannanoa. So we're just going to briefly look through these. Let's flip. All of these, except for these two here, these are at Swannanoa. When Walter Russell passed away, she took her last trip to Europe. And that was the last trip that she took back to England, back to her home. And so this was her trip at that time. And she stayed in the United States. She said she was very glad to get back, though. So let's go forward. When I began to think about writing this book, which was January 1st in 2012, I had a memory that I hadn't had before. That Leo Russell was at my high school. And and so I saw her there, but I didn't remember it until I began to write the book. This is a picture of my sister and a good friend of my family at Fort Defiance High School, which is where I went to high school. And I found this picture in the last 500 pictures I went through. I went through 6,500 photos to create this book. So many of these photos, for sure, have never before been seen, certainly the illustrations. I didn't know this was in there, you know. It was really exciting to go through all of the photos. After Walter passed away, Lau took over, and she basically knew that she could carry the message forward for so many years that she would still be here and wanted to stay at Swannanoa for the rest of her life. So let's go forward one more. These are just, this is a great way to end up, okay? You go back that one? Well, right there, okay. This is my great friend Sam Spiker and his wife who got married in the back, and great friends with Lau Russell. And this is the one and only Richard Delaney with Lau Russell. They were great, great friends, and so I'm just very honored, you know, to have seen these photos and to be able to put them in. So it's just really, really exciting. The last thing I'd like to share is that I am over here on the porch with books. We have a couple of chairs. If you want to come up and ask me questions about the history of the Russells, the history of Swannanoa, I'd be happy to answer them for you. And I want to share Sam Spiker, who is right here, and he's here today. He has promised that anyone who buys a book this weekend, he will take up for a 10-minute plane ride over Swannanoa for tomorrow. So I wanted to announce that. Nobody has known it before this announcement. So yes, Sam's got his own plane. I saw that slide. So I will point him out if you're looking for him. Highly suggest these books. My book, I will say, is the glue that holds everything together. I mean, that's the best way, and it's an introduction to the Dooleys and the Russells. That is the best way I can describe my book. So thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this segment of Interviews brought to you by the University of Science and Philosophy. Again, be sure to check out the website, philosophy.org, which is expanded greatly to include many new images in the updated and expanded gallery. The USP thanks you for your involvement and support in spreading the teachings of Walter and Lau Russell worldwide. We are, as always, dedicated to the uplift of humanity and character building in mankind worldwide as a solution to the human relations pollution that we all find ourselves in. So when we do our part, we do help bring light to the world and lift up our part of the world. My name is Matt Presti. Until next time, thank you for joining us.